This weekend at UFC 305, Israel Adesanya makes his return to the octagon after about a year of inactivity to face off against Dricus du Plessis for the middleweight championship of the world. And we did not make it even properly into fight week before Israel Adesanya reminded me and so many others why we find him to be so unbearable, so annoying, so cringe, all the rest of it, whatever adjective you want to use, he's all of the above, okay? Now, in a recent interview with TMZ Sports that I believe took place on Saturday night, Israel Adesanya is participating in what I like to call stolen poverty valor, okay? Essentially, Israel Adesanya likes to pretend that he grew up a certain way when he was a kid in order to make his background story better or to be more relatable. I don't know. Whatever the motive is, it's weird, okay? And it's not the first time that he's done this. So we're going to play the portion of the interview. I want to talk a little bit about it after and show you why he is absolutely lying, okay? Now, in this interview, he gets asked, is the beef with Dricus du Plessis real? Talking about the things that Dricus said in regards to Africa and all that stuff. The stuff that just constantly gets brought up when it comes to these two. Whenever we talk about Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis, this is typically the narrative that surrounds it. So this was his answer. I'm going to hit play. We'll talk about it after that.
Um, yeah, it's not personal. Like it's not personal. I just want him to take accountability for his remarks. And I'm also glad my friend Razak, Abdul Razak said it before his fight about 3 weeks.
All right, now he's talking about Abdul Razak Al Hassan, okay, who recently had a, not a DQ, but it was a no contest against Cody Brundage because he could not stop hitting him in the back of the head. And whether or not you think Cody Brundage kind of played it up in order to get out of that fight, fair enough. But he absolutely hit the back of the head a gang of times after being completely and totally unhinged at his media day interview, and where he went off on Dricus du Plessis and basically anybody that got brought up in that interview. By the way, Dricus du Plessis was just one part of that interview. It was a fairly long media day interview, especially for a guy that's not all that well known. And almost every single question he was asked, the dude would just like fly off the handle in a rage and start screaming and yelling, and then was continuously apologizing to the people asking him questions for his behavior, yet never amended it. You know, very odd, right? So that's what Israel Adesanya is talking about here. Abdul Razak Al Hassan was asked. He went off on Dricus du Plessis, spurging out a little bit. And so, anyways, we're going to hit play.
Weeks ago saying like, I respect Dricus, but he's a bitch for what he said. He's a bitch because Dricus is saying I train in Africa, I do this in Africa, and then people like Razak and myself who are forced to flee our own country because of, a better opportunity.
Now, that's the crux of this video right here, okay? People like Razak and myself were forced to flee our country, right? Which to me is unhinged, and it gives people a thought that you were like, it invokes the feeling that you were a refugee or an asylum seeker or something along those lines, okay? Acting as if you were forced to flee your country. You know what that does. You know the way that people portray that in their minds. And there will be so many people that are unaware of Israel Adesanya's background and genuinely just believe him. They'll just take his word for it, right? Which to me is insane, okay? And this is not the first time he's done this. As I said before we played the video, in the lead up to his rematch with Alex Pate at UFC 287, he basically did the exact same thing, in which in his media day interview, he said that the kids from the favela love him because they understand each other's struggle. As if he grew up even remotely similar to kids in the favelas in Brazil. Meanwhile, he's fighting a guy that literally did grow up like that. But of course, they're going to relate to you, Israel Adesanya, a guy who was forced to flee his country for better opportunities, okay? And not the guy that actually grew up in like the exact same place that these people are from. And it's just false, okay? It's just false. And we can prove that because, like many famous people, Israel Adesanya has a Wikipedia page, okay, that says a whole lot about his early life and all the rest of it. And if we go to his Wikipedia page, okay, now this is an unbelievably long name, but either way, we are going to go to the early life and background segment or portion of this Wikipedia, okay? I'm going to read it out for you guys. Israel Adesanya was born in Lagos, Nigeria, the eldest of 5 children. His father, Aluwafeme, was an accountant. Okay, that's a very good job, a profession, right? And his mother, Taiwo, is a nurse, right? The family had domestic servants. The family had domestic servants who bathed Israel Adesanya until he learned how to bathe himself at 8 years old. Can I ask you, does this sound like the kind of guy that was forced to flee his country? Okay, does this sound like a refugee or an asylum seeker? A guy that had domestic servants in Lagos, Nigeria, with an accountant father who, by the way, that may have been his profession, but Israel Adesanya has told us in interviews on many accounts how his father is very good with investing money, okay? Very good with investing money, and is actually in charge of Israel Adesanya's whole, like, financial portfolio, okay? And has made Israel Adesanya a ton of money. So it was, that may have been his profession, but he was also, that wasn't all he did. That wasn't the only money that he made. Do you know what I mean? So, insane to me. This is not the kind of person, you don't hear people seeking asylum that left servants. This is just not what happens, okay? This is just not what happens. It's not true. And then we will continue. Adesanya attended Chrysler High School, Opibi, and enrolled in its Taekwondo after-school club. He was removed by his mother due to an injury. Okay, in 1999, he relocated to Ghana. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is where Abdul Razak Al Hassan is from. And if I'm not mistaken, he actually did grow up in quite poor, right? Quite poor. Now, that's fine. But with his family for only 10 months, right? But due to his parents wanting their children to receive a well-recognized education, he settled in Rotorua, New Zealand at age 10, okay? He attended an all-boys school, right? Most likely private school. I mean, look at that, dude. Does this look like the kind of... Bro, look at that school. This guy... Forced to flee my country. Forced to flee. Are you talking about your parents forced you to flee because they wanted you to get a better education? Because as I said a few minutes ago, when you say stuff like that, it invokes a certain type of feeling or certain thought in people's minds. When you say something like, I was forced to flee a country, everybody, or at the very least, most people, I would imagine, tend to think of, as I said, asylum seekers or refugees. Okay, but that just wasn't the case. This guy was not poor. He never grew up poor. As a matter of fact, he grew up quite wealthy, at the very least, relative to a lot of Nigerians. Okay, and then he goes on in this interview to say that he had to flee his country and says some other things that I will show you guys right now.
He can't even he'll never understand that because he lives behind the fucking gates, forced to flee.
This is insane what he goes on to say. This is insane what he goes on to say. I'm going to back it up a little bit so we get the full context included in there.
In Africa, and then people like Razak and myself who are forced to flee our own country because of, a better opportunity.
Yeah.
He can't even he'll never understand that because he lives behind the fucking gates of his privileged life in South Africa, and he's able to do that there. So someone like Francis, who had to cross the desert to go...
Apologize for that blunder there. I just made it go full screen. But imagine claiming that somebody else lived a privileged life, like Dricus du Plessis. Now, maybe Dricus du Plessis did live a privileged life, but Israel Adesanya, so did you. You had domestic servants. Your father was an accountant. Your mother was a nurse. Okay? You did not grow up poor. You were quite privileged. You got moved because your parents wanted you guys to get a good education, and you went to a high school that looks like a fucking country club. Okay? And you want to talk about somebody being privileged. That is insane to me. Insane. Either way, we will continue just briefly.
Overseas to go train. If you know that's a story, you can't call him not a real African champion because he didn't train in Africa. It's like, bro, are you fucking kidding? The guy got sent back out to the desert 6-7 times to go die, and he survived. Like the things he said, and even without.
Of course, we have to invoke Francis Ngannou, by the way, which is who he was just talking about being sent back out to the desert to go die, because Francis Ngannou escaped his situation, truly fled his country to move to another country, right? But of course we have to invoke that because Israel Adesanya deep down knows that what he's saying about himself and the way he grew up is utter bullshit, Okay, so he has to go and invoke the most extreme case. By the way, Francis Ngannou's never spoken about this whole situation, probably because he is not insecure about how he identifies himself in terms of ethnicity or nationality and things of that nature, right? He's he doesn't seem bothered by it, but we'll continue.
Francis being champion without myself being champion, without Kamaru being champion, he would have never been champion. We paved the way for him, and then he comes out there and tries to take it all for himself. I wonder where he got that from. What kind of mindset is that? Like, oh, I see this and I want it all for myself. Like, oh, look at this beautiful land. Look at this. I want it all for myself. What kind of mindset is that? What kind of mindset is it that you see three African champions and you're going to be the fourth one? You could have said, it'd be a great honor to be out of the legends of African champions that have been in the UFC. He tries to say, take it all for himself. That's a colonialist mindset.
Ah, there it is, dude. The big C word. The big evil white colonizer, Dricus du Plessis. Okay, now I just want to point something out. Israel Adesanya could take 3 seconds to look this stuff up, right? It's not impossible, okay? Dricus du Plessis is not of the, like, British Empire, right? His family, his ancestors are not from Great Britain. They're not the big evil white colonizers or whatever that Israel Adesanya likes to paint them out to be, okay? He's Afrikaner, Boers. They've been around since the 1600s at least. Immigration was literally encouraged in those times, setting up trade and stuff like this, okay? He is not painting... It's so disingenuous because when Israel Adesanya talks about this, it becomes very clear and very apparent that all he is talking about, it's one thing in particular. I'm going to let him get to his end line here before I bring that up, because I don't want to talk about this all fight week. But I saw this interview. I couldn't not say something because it drives me crazy, right? Feigning poverty, stolen poverty valor. It is truly what it is. And then to go on to call somebody else privileged while you grew up with servants, okay? And then to try to paint Dricus du Plessis with the colonizer brush because of the color of his skin is insane when his family, his ancestors have been in South Africa since the 1600s, okay?
And he doesn't understand the error of his ways, but I will show him the way.
I will show him the way.
There seems like there are some things that are said in the lead up to fights, and then you all fight, and it's like, okay, cool. There are also things that are really serious and go beyond fighting. It seems like, what he said might be one of those things where it's not just, hey, everything's cool after the fight. Not that you're going to try and kill him after the bell ring,
Okay, Jesus, a little aggressive, but okay. Odd to even imply that, but either way.
The final bell rings, but it seems like one of those things where, hey, you're always going to remember. It's not something you're going to forget.
I'll never forget. But after the fight, I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see how we feel after the fight. But I'll never forget the Three Kings. You can never ever discredit the Three Kings, and it's not even just because of the belts. Like what Francis said, fuck the belts. You're a champion because of the way you carry yourself and because of what you've been through in life. Dricus will always be an African champion, but he will never be one of the Three Kings.
And there it is, dude. We was Kangs and shit, right? What it boils down to is Dricus du Plessis does not have their skin color. Now, I wonder if he would say this about a fighter fighting out of, like, Morocco or Egypt or any of these places, right? But doesn't really matter. It truly doesn't. It's just funny to me. Also, earlier on, he said something like, without me, Kamaru, and Francis, he would have never been an African champion, which is odd because it's not like he had to fight any of them on the come up. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I don't understand that mindset either. It's odd to me that he would accuse Dricus du Plessis of having a colonizer mindset, right? But they're equating themselves to kings. So if he's got a like colonialist mindset, do you have like a monarchy mind? Like it's very weird, very weird. And just to reiterate one more time, this man did not grow up poor. Right, this is stolen poverty valor. There are people in the UFC that genuinely came from a hard upbringing, from a very poor background, like somebody like Alex Pereira, right? Grew up in, the favelas in Brazil, right? Working in a tire shop as a kid. Israel Adesanya was going to a fucking private school that looks like a country club and had servants to bathe him until he was 8 years old, dude. I've got kids. I don't remember it taking this long. You know what I mean? A little odd. a little odd. Also was able to, if we were to read further, you know, at some point in here, you guys can do this on your own time if you'd like to, but he dropped out of college to pursue a career in kickboxing, right? So this guy was not bringing in any income, dropped out of university or college or whatever to pursue his dreams. The only way that this is possible is if you have supportive parents. Do you know what I mean? Or you genuinely do what some people do and are homeless and shit. But that wasn't the case, right? Israel Adesanya, that was not the case. So it drives me crazy when people try to pretend like there's something they're not. It reminds me of that kid in school, you know, who would tell you just the craziest stories, and you're like, okay, buddy. But it's just code switching in a way. And it's odd to me, dude. You could just be honest about your upbringing. Talk about how good your parents were and how they helped you get to where you are. And listen, he does do that on some occasions. But, like, give them more credit, dude. Because, like, what I couldn't imagine that. I couldn't imagine having two hardworking parents, right, that wanted a better life for me and worked hard enough to be able to migrate or immigrate to other countries to give me more opportunities, right? And then downplay that by acting as if I grew up dirt poor and had to flee my country as like an asylum seeker, right? It's odd. Anyways, dude, that's it for this video. Like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.